Greetings, everybody. Well, maybe it's the time of year. Maybe it's the time of man. Like Crosby, Stills, and Nash said, we got to get ourselves back to the garden. I don't know what it is, but suddenly I've been having folks come at me and ask me questions about living here in Hawaii, about growing permaculture food forests. I'm getting nice cards in the mail from people who said, we'll be moving to Hilo in a couple of years. I've had a lot of response lately that people's motivation to move here to the islands during the eruption last year, it kind of let up. We didn't see as many people thinking about wanting to live here. Well, Pele was active, and Fisher number 8 was throwing 250-foot walls of lava down there in Leilani Estates. But it seems to be coming back around. Now I'm seeing people who are watching videos I've done in the past about living in Hawaii. I'm, like I say, getting questions about it. I banged into a gentleman the other day who watches my channel all the time, and they're here renting a place. He's thinking about wanting to buy land here, and do this whole food forest, permaculture, self-sufficient type living in the tropics thing, I guess, seems to be what most people are looking towards Puna for. Well, I guess I started thinking about all this in a different way when I was speaking with an associate the other day, and he referred to Puna as the new Florida. Now, wow, that one got me right here. And I went, oh, no, not that, please. Oh, Lord, at least don't bring your politics here from Florida, whatever you do. But yeah, you see, I remember Florida during the 1950s when I was a boy. We used to travel there from Chicago when I was young. And it was, I loved it. Boy, oh boy, back in the 1950s, Florida was miles of empty beaches, alligators, Everglades swamps, orange groves, and cattle ranches. It was pretty agricultural, quite open, not too crowded, but there was only 1/3 of the people on Earth at that time when I was young than there is today. Population has increased by at least 2/3, and so every place, except Kansas, is getting more crowded all the time. Every good place is becoming more crowded all the time. Pressure for resources, pressure for water eventually, you name it. There's been some terrible climate problems here on the planet in the last few years, and you can bet that a whole lot of the social unrest across the planet actually could base itself in weather. That historically, the fall of the Roman Empire was in line with the mini ice age they had in Europe. These kinds of things where the barbarian hordes will storm the civilized world usually occur when the weather goes to poop. It seems to have, but it's raining here today, and that's the first question you have to ask yourself. If you're one of them folks that's thinking, boy, I sure want to move to Hawaii, the question you got to ask if you're going to come to the east side here to Puna and Hilo, and that is, can you take the rain? That's a serious question. It really is. I don't have any trouble with it myself directly as a person. I like the rain a lot, but it raises problems. We have the new solar system here on the house, with Tesla Powerwall and best collectors around we could find, and then bought a Chevy Bolt EV to plug in, and so we can drive with electricity. And well, it's been raining and raining and raining and raining, and I'm having a hard time holding enough juice in my Tesla Powerwall to make everything happy around here. And so it can get to the point where it will rain so much that it will affect your life. Especially if you're from California and some of those sunny western states. This is the far western state, also the far southern one, but you may find that it's not to your liking out here. Paradise is a state of mind. Paradise is not a state in the Union of the United States. Paradise is wherever you make it. Now, I'll admit that if I tell people, oh, I live in Hawaii, that, wow, they go, oh, man, oh, wow, it's like I get this reaction. It doesn't matter if they're from Italy, Romania, or wherever. Generally speaking, I get that sort of reaction from people that, why, you're so lucky, I wish I lived there. But, you don't get the same reaction if you tell people, hey, I'm moving to Kansas. They'll probably go, why? So there are places that are vacating and there are places that are filling, and it appears Puna is filling. I always thought that if you have an island that's one of the most remote on the planet, it's at least 2,500 miles away from any other spot on the map. It's never touched any other place. It's always been alone out here. We have no freeways, and when you get in your car, the only place you can go is in a circle. You can't go anywhere besides around the island, unless you had to ship the car on a cargo container somewhere else. But so you get this. It's not very American. See the USA in your Chevrolet. Yeah, you don't do that kind of stuff. We go to town in the car and stuff, but it's an island. You're stuck here, unless you want to get in a jet. It's also an active volcanic island, and so I bet when I decided to move here that, middle of the ocean, no freeways, America loves its cars, blah, 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 and then it's a volcano, and no one likes lava. Should be pretty good bet, I figured. That this would be a place where maybe finally I can move, where I won't have housing developments covering all the cornfields in town, where even when I lived in the North Woods, I had copper mining companies trying to open mines on the river I lived on. Seems like everywhere I go, somebody's showing up to mess up the scene. I figured for sure, here in Hawaii, yeah, we'll be good, at least maybe for the rest of my life, that it shouldn't get too crazy, but gosh, it's growing. People are coming here. All I can tell you is it must be pretty bad wherever you're coming from, because there's a volcano here, It's a strange phenomenon. I'm not sure what's behind it. I really am not, but it appears, as my associate said, Puna, the new Florida. This seems to be where quite a few people are coming, both to retire or just to get out of the cold. Generally speaking, when the weather gets crazy here in Hawaii, it's nothing like when the weather gets crazy wherever you live. It's things like 6 days of rain. Yeah, that could happen. Yeah, that can really happen here. You see stuff like that, but generally the wind speeds are fairly low. Big island here, the offshore water is too deep, too cold to let hurricanes really come onto the land much. We've actually never had one that made landfall, but they're getting closer. We had one there a couple of years back, almost made landfall in South Point. So maybe as the ocean gets warmer, we see more of this happening, but we're generally not in a good situation for that kind of disastrous weather. It's a pretty mellow place. But, wherever you go, once you get there, you are there. And so every place you go is really going to be very much the same. Whether the environment changes around you or not, you're the center of your own universe. I don't want to get metaphysical about all of this, but it's a fact that if you're not happy where you're at, you're probably not going to be happy anywhere. That's been my conclusion of life. I've said this before, that I did not end up here because this was one of Bill's dreams and a goal. I didn't have any visions of being here. This place reached out, grabbed me, pulled me here. I feel quite a bit at home. I like it a lot, but when it comes to whether you're a good fit or not for this kind of environment, I think you need to reverse that. I hear people talk about it, but fact is that the environment generally doesn't make too many efforts to suit you. What happens is you make the effort to suit the environment. So while you're here in Hawaii, most of the time you could wear short pants and flip-flops, and so you don't need to worry about your wardrobe much. We don't need air conditioners at this elevation. It's always fairly cool. I don't need heating systems right here because it doesn't get cold enough to worry about, and so on. So there's a lot of pressures of life, I guess, are reduced living here. Food grows year-round. So you don't have to worry about sacking up potatoes for the winter and putting them in the root cellar. I wander out in the field and pull up some taro any old time I need it. So there are a lot of leisurely, more casual or relaxed type aspects to living here. I remember living in the upper Midwest, and it was a constant struggle in the fall to make sure that we had the firewood pile was big enough, that there was enough food put up, that we weren't letting the crops rot and freeze in the garden, blah, blah. How much fish did you have in the freezer, and so on. A whole lot more concern over survival and well-being. Comfort's pretty easy to find here. Most of the time, if I put on a shirt and a pair of pants and sit on my porch over here, I'm generally comfortable most of the time. So, there's the paradise aspect. You don't work as hard at a lot of things here. But some things you have to work pretty darn hard at. It really depends. But it's a matter of, can you adapt to the environment that you've come into? It will be different than where you came from generally. I find Hawaii to be one of the most unusual places in the United States to live in. And I also find that most things that you learned previously about living on the land or, period, on the earth, they don't necessarily apply as well here in Hawaii. Conditions are very different. Very different. Your problems will all be very different here. So it's a matter of adaptation. I hardly ever consumed Roselle fruiting hibiscus, for instance, when I lived in Wisconsin. Yet here it's one of my major crops. I hardly ever grew sweet potatoes until I moved to California. Now that the regular potato doesn't raise here in Mountain View for me, I raise sweet potatoes. And so, there's a definite switch. One of my main carbs has now become the sweet potato in the Morning Glory family instead of the regular potato in the tomato family. These are subtle things, but they're constant. I run across these types of things where I need to change myself to be able to be comfortable and happy here. And I find if I do it willingly, and don't battle it and worry much about it, just go with the flow, life's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. But then again, I know people who insist that they're going to do this or do that, when they come to different areas. I've heard people want to raise some of the most ridiculous crops here, for instance, because they brought that idea with them from some other place. Well, the truth is, they may very well be successful at it if they apply enough energy. I always figure, whatever it is that works, I don't battle an environment if I can avoid it. I try not to. It's hard enough when the pigs get in, or when the frogs won't stop croaking, or when the birds ate all your seed, it gets tough anyway, no matter where you're at. So I don't usually add problems to it. I tend to like to look at fruits and vegetables and crops that will thrive within this environment, and a lot of them are not the same as the ones I grew up with. I've changed my diet radically, actually. You know, some of the things we did in California do work here. You know, I've got avocados, which I love. I've got citrus, which I love. You know, that's all good stuff, and it's something that I was doing in the western U.S. too. But you know, the addition of pineapples, papayas, and all this other stuff that we do here, that's all new. It's all new. I don't get hardly any apples anymore, but I get papayas and bananas to eat constantly. Is that a problem? Well, I don't know. Depends how you look at it. But I don't think that your problems in life will be solved by coming to Hawaii. What you will be faced with is a whole brand new set of them. With maybe a little bit milder weather. The scenery's real good, depending on where you park yourself. You know, we have nice views from here, good air circulation and so on. I can watch volcanoes and oceans, you know, and sunrises. On the other hand, most of the cheap land is buried back in the woods. You can't see anything out of there. So I guess it wouldn't matter where you were living on some of the cheap land. The other thing I would note about that is that I know Puna is a draw for people, and that's why my associate called it the new Florida, is because a lot of the real estate here is really not that expensive. And a lot of the real estate that's here that isn't that expensive isn't worth a damn either. As far as land goes, you know, it's lava. And so I don't want to stroke folks the wrong way, but what I can tell you is that usually the cheaper land will cost you a fortune to put it to work. That's what I'm seeing with most of these folks who went for the cheap stuff. Guy got 3 acres for $14,000. Not bad, you know. It'd be a long time before they ever get it up to something where it, you know, where it's really nice. Well, I've seen a few places weren't too expensive that are pretty fair. I was, you know, had Thanksgiving with some friends that didn't spend too much on their parcel here, and it was nice. You know, his guy's a good gardener, though. He's already been hard at work, and there's orchids all over the place, and I see a lot of plants from my nursery growing in the yard. You know, and he's hauled in compost and so on, and it's coming along all right. But in general, the cheap land will cost you a fortune. That's if you want to do something really nice with it. It depends on who you are, how you want to live, you know, and all that. There's people who live in little shacks around here and tarp cities and stuff too, because the weather can allow for that. Me, I've gotten too old. I'm not 25 years old, hippie homesteader anymore, where I'm willing to suffer, you know, put up with going to the outhouse at 40 below zero, you know, and stuff like this, so I could say, oh, wow, I live in the country, you know, I own this land. I'm not willing to do that anymore. You know, this is decade number 7 here on the planet for me. I'm looking for ease, and I want some comfort. I don't want to have to stress to be able to continue my life. I want it easy. And I'll tell you, when you got soft soil to dig in and you want to go out and plant a row of cabbages, it's a lot easier than trying to go out there and do that same thing on a lava flow. You know, you may have paid 1/10 of what I paid for this land, but remember, you only pay that one time. Most of us who are gardeners have good diets, and so we probably will live a long and healthy life. And so whereas it might take you 5 years to pay off the land, you may have another 85 years on top of that. You know, it's exaggeration, but you may have a long time that you're going to have to be living with that land. And if it was chosen poorly or because it was cheap, you may find it's very difficult to get rid of too. I wouldn't be buying it from you, that's for sure. So you can get stuck with something for the rest of your life when you're drawn by the cheap price initially. It is not a good factor for making a judgment. No, because you'll be making money the rest of your life. Yeah, you will. Trust me. And for most of us, it's probably more and more and more as I become older and I become far more adept at creating wealth. To me, it's pretty easy to come up with a dollar bill. It's not a complicated thing. So I certainly don't really look at the price of things as being the motivating factor of why I would acquire it. And I definitely encourage everybody looking at land here in Hawaii that you go for the good stuff. There's some really fine property here. There's some beautiful land. Oh, man. I mean, you can own a piece of property here that's got a 1,000-foot waterfall on it. I mean, that's real. You know, you can have the surf crashing at your feet daily if you want. There's wet sides, dry sides, high sides, low sides. It's warm down low, cool up high. Apples will grow up high in the mountains, but, it's coconuts down at the shore. The west side of the island to the northwest is definitely desert. It's sunny, warm, and dry almost all the time over there. If you talk about Kahala. Kona's about half the rain of Mountain View. Well, this year it's been more, so you never know about that. But generally, the western side of the island tends to be drier. The southern edge of the island is drier. The north and the east edges of the island are wetter. But you got some beautiful real estate here, and you got some awful stuff too. And it's the awful stuff that's cheap. There really isn't too much exception to that. Every once in a while you can run across a distressed sale, but my neighbor on this side over here went ahead and bought the property that was the neighbor's on that side over there, so he now owns both sides of me. And while that was a distressed sale, there was a bankruptcy and there was money owed and blah blah blah. And by the time he got done purchasing that on a distressed sale, he probably paid more for it than he would have paid if he just bought it straight out off the market. Distressed sales do not always end up well. It depends on what you got to go through. In this case, between the bank and the Attorney General, actually, in the state of Hawaii, it ended up being pretty damn expensive. And then the property went into distress when it was abandoned a while ago, and so it's messed, and he's got to fix it. And it'll be a long road. I haven't seen any of the cheap property around here become anything in the short order. Most of the cheap property that became something had a lot of money poured into it after the fact. Just keep that in mind. But I'm not sure, you folks out there, you might tell me, why is it that people are drawn to want to move here lately? Puna is now the fastest growing district in the state of Hawaii. This is really booming over here. And so, again, I find it strange. It's a district on an active volcano that periodically gets covered in lava, and it's in the middle of the ocean, and there's no way to get out of here except for an airplane. So I'm not exactly sure why people are drawn here, but I'd be interested in finding out what it is that folks think they're going to find, when they come here. It's a good place. I got all good stuff to say about it, but it's, you make your reality, So I like it here. It likes me. We're all happy, so we're good with it. Anyhow, that was a little rap about being here in Hawaii, whether it's the time of year, the time of man that's wanting to bring everybody back to the garden, but there seems to be a whole lot of people wanting to come over here and live on a banana farm. Aloha. Y'all have a wonderful day. And goes.